Hey everyone, I am Seth Adam Smith, and life is positively awful. Wouldn't you agree? Life is awful, but sometimes adding a missing piece or perspective can change something awful into something full of awe. I'm Seth Adam Smith, and this is Awe-ful Inspiration. Well, that's cool that that introduction worked. Good morning and welcome to Awful Inspiration. I have wanted to do this show for probably 3 or 4 years now. Um, what it is it's a inspirational morning show, Monday through Friday, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes at most, of just stories and things that I find uh, positively awful, right? Inspirational, awful stories. And what I mean by that is I've been fascinated by stories that are uh, that that keep you guessing, right? A story that on one perspective, it on the surface it seems positively awful, right? But as you learn more about it, and maybe you see a different perspective. You see maybe 2020, the vision that you get at the end of the road, where you look back and you go, "Wow, I didn't realize that that was the journey this person in the story was making, or that I personally was making." Right? I love those stories. I love those stories that change your perspective. Right? For example, I've been collecting all sorts of different stories and experiencing things like this. Like when I hike the Grand Canyon, I'm always made aware of this. So I actually bring out a little notebook. I'll jot down little notes, little ideas for stories. And I have notebooks and full. I probably have well over 1,000 different stories or different reasons, um, different things that are what I would consider to be awful inspiration. Because I noticed something when I was struggling with depression in my early 20s, and eventually that depression culminated in a suicide attempt. I noticed that, in that state of mind, I was actively seeking out stories that were negative, whether or not those were stories about me, stories about the world in general, or stories about other people. I wanted to see the world as I felt, right? And so it was this depressive cycle, right? You when your eyesight is a certain way, you tend to see the world in that regard, right? We see the world as we are, not as it is. And so I was actively seeking out negative stories about myself and about the world to justify my state of being, how I felt. And it wasn't until I had a good friend help me find stories that were inspirational, that began on a negative note. Like somebody was dealing with this uh, this lifestyle, they were dealing with this situation, um, but the way they perceived it, the way they overcame it, there was this fantastic twist. Stories like Winston Churchill, of how he began and how his family situation was not ideal. He was the only child; nobody really liked him. His parents didn't really like him, and he was always thirsty to prove himself. Struggled with depression, struggled with stuttering. Um, and his struggle with stuttering, his speech impediment, is how he phrased it. Um, his speech impediment actually led him to become a great speaker, which in turn served him very well during World War II, when his country, when the world was looking for inspiration in the radio. He was able to speak to them and offer them hope. It's stories like that, right? where it begins with a speech impediment, but it ends with a man who is one of the greatest speakers ever to live. Another story that I really like, and I'll probably get into more detail about it in subsequent episodes, is the story of the man who fell off the Mayflower. And falling off the Mayflower and the subsequent experiences that the Pilgrims had would lead you to believe that something very terrible was happening to them, but they chose not to view it that way, and their persistence and their faith led to some really wonderful things. So I am excited to start this series. This is just a brief introduction. As I said, subsequent episodes will be, maybe 15 to 30 minutes long at the beginning of every morning. And hopefully, when you wake up in the morning, you can listen to something. It'll inspire you, because if you're anything like me, you hate the morning. I hate waking up in the morning. I'm not optimistic. I'll turn on some politics. I'll turn on some news, and I'll be like, "Oh man, the world is a terrible place," right? And it's not. It's not. The world is an awful place, right? It's a place that is full of awe, right? And that might actually be the origin of the word awful. At some point, someone had changed the meaning of that word, kind of like how we say literally when we actually mean figuratively. Now, literally, instead of meaning literally, it oftentimes means figuratively. And in many cases, the word awful was meant to describe something that was full of awe, just like awesome, right? It's full of awe. And I actually believe that. I believe that there are many experiences that we are called to go through. We're not supposed to avoid discomfort. We're not supposed to avoid those things that challenge us. And in fact, I think we are called in those moments to become something better. And the stories I will share with you in this awful series will hopefully inspire you to look at whatever you're dealing with and that you perceive as something that is awful, and see it as an opportunity to do something awesome, to become something awful, something full of awe. So these will be from the heart. I'm just writing down a couple of notes. I want to speak off the cuff. I want to speak as clearly as I can, and as from the heart as I can, as sincerely as I can. These stories have been in my heart for a very long time. For 3 or 4 years, I felt called to do this so many times. And in 2020, I remember I was like, I should have started this series a while ago. And then in 2020, I let it get to me. I let 2020 get to me, and it took me all of 2021 to really pull myself out, right? To recognize that God was an integral part of my life, and I had forgotten him. And in remembering him and calling out to him, he has been able, he has alchemized my experiences into something. He has alchemized my awful experiences into something truly awful. And I hope the same for you as you listen to these awful stories. I'm Seth Adam Smith, and this is the beginning of Awe-ful Inspiration. Thank you so much for watching.